Hey, so in the last video we had a look at how we could conditionally attach CSS classes. We also learned how we can import style sheets into specific components with this configuration, with this metadata here. So now let's mess a little bit more with our DOM here. Let's say we want to add a button which is only enabled if we, again, have entered yes into our input field. So I will add this button here. Let me just enter several line breaks. Then I'll have my button only enabled if yes was entered. So let's save this, and at the moment obviously it's always enabled. Now I will use another directive here, a so-called attribute directive, which is just a default directive with squared brackets. So we have this default, that's a standard, that's the most default way a directive can get. Squared brackets and then the name of the directive within those squared brackets. So this disable thing here is not bound to the disabled HTML attribute of our button, but it's an Angular 2 built-in directive. So just an instruction like every directive which tells Angular 2, hey, I have to disable this button if, and now here again, this expression between the quotation marks returns true. This is generally how all directives work. You have the directive name here. Then it differs if you have to use squared brackets or parentheses. For events you have parentheses, and for property binding for attribute directives, so directives where you don't get an event but change the element, you have squared brackets. And this is how you can memorize this. If you have squared brackets, then you're doing something to the element. You're changing the look of it, you're passing some value into it, whatever. You're changing the element. If you have parentheses, then we're talking about events. We're getting something from that element. We're catching some action. We're listening to an event from that element. We're not changing it. We're getting something from it. That's very important. Squared brackets, putting something into an element. Parentheses, getting something out of that element. Very, very important. That is how data binding works in Angular 2. Now here I got my disabled directive, and the expression I want to check is again if input.value equals yes, or if it is not equal to yes, then I want to disable this, right? So let me save this, and obviously this should be input element. So let me save it again. Now you can see it is disabled. Now if I enter anything, well, it's not changing, but if I enter yes, maybe it was a little bit hard to see, but I can now click it. Whereas if nothing is entered, I can't click it. So this is how we could enable and disable a button depending on the state of another element in our DOM. Now let's say we want to change the color of our name depending on if we entered yes or not. Well, we could again use this and attach the isAwesome class, but I don't want to make it bold. Obviously I could create a new class, but we have another shortcut directive like this class directive here, where we can directly apply a certain style. So I will again wrap this into a span element here, and then I will use this style directive here. And as the class directive, it's not kind of a classic directive, not a default attribute directive, which has this attribute style. This is where the name comes from. But instead we access the style here again with a dot, and we want to set the color. So here we can set all the CSS properties, or all the styles, how we can edit them with CSS. Important thing here, if we have a CSS element which would have a hyphen like background hyphen color, well then we would have it camel cased, so we would have background color with no hyphen, no space between, just with a capital B. So background, capital C, background, and then color, capital C. So this is how you would rename those CSS properties here, but in general, it should be easy to figure out. Here we're just setting the color, and now in this expression, well, I could just write red in single quotation marks, because this has to be a string, and now it is red. Now I want to check if I entered yes. So I will add input element dot value equals yes, also in single quotation marks. Well, then it should be red, otherwise nothing. So this is like a simple tertiary operator here, where we have this one line conditional check. And now you can see it is not red by default, but if I enter yes, it gets red. So we get this style directive here to quickly change the style of a certain part of our DOM. We got this class directive here to quickly attach or detach a class to a certain part of our DOM. We got this attribute directive here, where we do pass something into our button here, where we say you should either be disabled or enabled depending on whatever is entered into this input element. And this is how we play with our DOM, how we pass data, how we change it depending on what the user does, on the state of our application. And this is what we call data binding, how we basically use our data to change the DOM. And obviously we will have a lot deeper look throughout this course, but that is really the core of it. And as you can see, it is not that difficult to get. It just requires some exercise, and we will do a lot of exercise throughout this course. See you in the next videos. Bye.